Hey folks, this is Emily with American Resiliency. This video is important. I want to talk with you about where we are and where we're likely going. We're going to do an Earth systems update, and we're going to go beyond that to weave some pieces together. I know a lot of you want to understand AMOC collapse impacts on North America better, so I want to say right up front that this video will contain some analysis on that. Okay, so we got the new Copernicus bulletin. Here's a figure from that. Came out in early November. You can see the global temp has ticked up again, which is ominous. The anomaly size has ticked up very slightly. You can see in this figure here, which is ominous. We are at 1.65 C over baseline for October of 24. Unfortunately, the ominousness is going to continue because it correlates weirdly with some other short-term news. You probably know we were forecast for a La Nina winter, a cooling trend kind of winter. You can see that here in this statement from NOAA. But like, we're not seeing that La Nina trend yet. And I want to show you in the IRI. This is a group in Colombia. So we're talking about a non-government organization. Here we've got the official NOAA ENSO probabilities. Look how high the blue bars are compared to the gray bars, which would be neutral. If we look at the IRI model, those blue bars are barely peaking above the gray bars, and we're having stronger neutral chances than El Nino chances for more months. And in both models, I think this is the real like creepy weird thing, is that we're seeing increased chance of El Nino returning. So restating, in the non-NOAA model, we're looking at very narrow, very short cooling trends probabilities. And in both the NOAA and the IRI models, we are seeing a probability emerge for El Nino again already. And let's remember, we just got out of El Nino. Let's go back to that first Copernicus figure. This crazy bump here, this huge baseline temperature increase, this huge anomaly increase beginning in 23, peaking in February of 24, is correlated with our last El Nino event. So I kind of don't like anything I'm telling you about so far. Let's look at some more stuff I don't like. If you've been following my updates on this issue, or if you, like me, enjoy following the numbers themselves as they come in, you've probably noticed that blue blob, that cold anomaly, keeps showing up. Like, it's there most of the time now. That's one of the signs that's worth watching when we're concerned about AMOC collapse behavior. Persistent cold anomaly, Northern Europe. We actually expect that to be one of the strongest, earliest observable signs. It's one of the signs that would be hardest to conceal if we are seeing AMOC collapse begin. Let's talk for just a moment about the word collapse. That's a word that's become more popular lately, usually in reference to Earth systems collapse or to industrial civilization collapse. I feel like collapse has this resonance with permanence, so I want to clarify something. When we talk about AMOC collapse, it might be useful to step back from that word for a minute and look at the phenomena also through the lens of phase change, because we have some evidence from looking back through Earth's history that AMOC, this pattern of water circulation in the Atlantic, has moved between phase states before. It's important to remember that while we are living in a time of extraordinarily high change, it's not like Earth's climate systems are static, and if we could go back to 1932, everything would be cool. We live on a dynamic planet. There have been changes forever. And that's not to normalize the extremely high rate of change we're currently experiencing. It's just to give some long distance, deep time perspective. And when we talk about AMOC collapse, I think that collapse is a useful vocabulary for our time scale, our lifetimes. Because if this system starts going into a phase change, it's very unlikely we're going to be personally seeing the other side of that phase change. But to the generational thinker, it's worth knowing and feeling that our lifetimes are small and that they offer us only one perspective. Paleoclimate evidence suggests when this pattern of water circulation in the Atlantic Ocean changes, the phase change happens pretty fast. Like, people feel it happening in real time. People are aware that something has gone wrong big time. But that doesn't mean it happens like turning out a light. Like, if you've seen that movie, The Day After Tomorrow, where everyone has to drive down to Mexico to escape the glaciers that form over 3 days of superstorms, that movie is fun. It has some legit science mixed in with the Hollywood stuff. But I don't think driving to Mexico for a super awesome party is actually going to be our best strategy here. Let's do some learning together and explore a more likely scenario. I want to show you some figures from a great paper looking at what we expect over the first decades of AMOC collapse. But real quick first, because this is an Earth systems update, let's check out sea surface temperature. All right, so first glance, this is like almost good news. Red line, that's 2024. It's going down, right? We're not the hottest the ocean has ever been, which is our new standard for if things are good or not. But I still think this looks pretty weird. I mean, look at these slopes here. If you look at these dashed lines, these are averaged lines, and you can see that the slopes we're talking about this year, they look kind of more fun to bike on than we would expect from the averaged line. And I can imagine that you could be like, Emily, I'm a critical thinker. I'm looking at this. Look at these steep slopes here. This, you ought to know, these really big bits sticking out from the graph here. This is the 2015 2016 El Nino event, which was itself a very serious event in Earth's climate systems. So I don't know, folks. We're seeing line go down. That's always nice. But if you're like me and you're interested in change, you're interested in rate of change, this rate of change that we're seeing in sea surface temperatures in 2024 seems higher than we're used to seeing in the Earth system. Almost like we hit a tipping point and something is maybe different in the ocean. A lot of people are getting very suspicious about this. I'm sure you've seen there are many new videos and reports coming out just in the last few months about AMOC collapse, and it can be confusing, legitimately confusing. You know, almost nobody in the field, almost no scientists thought we were going to be dealing with this stuff now. Even a couple of years ago, AMOC collapse was projected not to be a risk for 100 years. So there's confusion in the world of climate, and we haven't put as many resources into modeling for near-term AMOC collapse as we have for other scenarios because this seemed so far away and unlikely. But I'm sure you've seen the headlines that now place this process as near as 2025, which is in 6 weeks. And I don't know, folks, the Earth system's evidence, it really has me concerned. Let's do some paper time. Let's see what we can expect in some nice modeling. So this is just one paper, but I love this paper, and you can download it for free because Andrea Teixeira is cool. I'm going to take you all right to the meat. Here's figure 2. It's got 4 subfigures showing us an average of what changes we expect to see in precipitation, temperature, and wind patterns looking 50 to 100 years out from AMOC collapse process. We see big changes in our world here that look like they're going to mess us up real bad. Especially here, look at this deformation of precipitation cycles around the equator. That looks terrible. Look at this extreme cold forming up over northern Europe. That's going to be a big change. Looks to me like we're also seeing Antarctica kind of getting laser blasted with a lot of the heat increase not focused in populated areas, which many of us might have been very concerned about. Everybody south of the equator in terms of temperature looks like relatively little landmass, but a lot of ocean warming is predicted in these models. Another element that's very concerning are these big wind changes, including what looks like potential changes that could drive major storms out of the Gulf. So looking at that is pretty scary. Looking globally at where all the dark colors are is pretty scary. So let's focus in on North America. It looks so boring. Looks boring there. It looks even boring mostly except by the Gulf and the other 2 figures. Light colors. That's what you want. You want to not stand out on the map. To give a summary for general North American conditions, particularly in the areas that we've been exploring with particular interest in the northern US and southern Canada, those areas are looking a little colder, a little drier. North America is looking a little more impacted by inland hurricanes in the southeast that anyone would really enjoy. And if AMOC goes down, we do see some exceptions to that drying trend. A couple of mild precipitation increase blobs were projected over a couple of really precious areas, the Monongahela in the east and the old growth coastal forests centered around Washington in the west. So that's 50 to 100 years in the future, when this shutdown is well into the doing its thing, messing us up process. But what about near term? This paper's got it. Here we're looking at figure 3, surface temperature changes, sea ice changes. Look, it's decadal, years 1 through 10, years 11 through 20, 21 through 30, and 31 through 40. What's the first sign? It's this cold anomaly over northern Europe, Everyone else, we're talking about fairly weak trends that are being observed. We are seeing unusual warming trends in the oceans around Antarctica. And this sort of very mild cooling trend that we would project over North America in years 1 through 10, I have to say, there's a big meh there, is my gut reaction, because that mild cooling trend wouldn't even get us back to 2000s normal. And that's if our overall warming trend magically turned off. I think it's really critical that we not live in a fantasy where either we're looking at this cooling scenario from AMOC shutdown or we're looking at normal continued warming. We're going to be talking about a model collision. We're talking about both things happening at the same time. This cooling trend over Europe, it looks like it is going to become worse, like it's going to continue to intensify decade by decade in a pretty serious way. It's going to continue to be a leading signal. And let's look down at wind patterns. They'll see these big storms forming over Europe and going down into the Mediterranean. And it looks like that will become worse as well, and that we'll see differentials in the pressures emerging as well over the next 40 years. When I see these things, when I see this information together, it makes me very concerned about impacts in the near-term future on Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Now let's look back at the first figure that we studied to better understand the changes in there. I wish we had precipitation breakout for the first 10 years, but you can't have everything, right? I think that in this first figure, where we're looking farther out in time, 50 to 100 years out, we see a number of signs of what to watch for. Persistent, unusual cooling trend and storms over Europe are a critical tell that this process would be beginning. It looks like there could be signs emerging at the early stages of this precipitation pattern as well. We saw those terrible floods begin to emerge in South America last year at the same time as serious droughts in other parts of South America. And we are observing the increased moisture coming to these parts of Africa predicted in this figure. It is being observed, greening in Africa now. So I don't know, folks, this is just my read of the trends we're seeing, and I'd be glad to hear any counter arguments that could normalize what I'm observing a little bit. But I think that we do see a lot of signs that this process may be underway, that we are probably in years 1 through 10 of the shutdown process, and that if this is indeed a phase change type system, that this is a process that will continue for the rest of our lives. I think many of us were accepting the rest of our lives would be taking place in a time of change. Change and uncertainty, they were both already important realities to accept. It's okay to have times of struggle with these realities. I think that's very normal. Looking at these figures overall, globally, this is clearly going to mess us up big time, but that's a topic for another day. It deserves more attention. Let's focus back on the US and Canada, where most of us are really focused, where most of us are on the ground. That mild cooling we expect over much of North America, the precipitation to Washington and to the Monongahela, the changes to the winds, including that potential for larger storms in the Gulf, all that's going to be happening in the context of continued warming. I think it's worth saying again, warming is going to continue because our atmosphere is totally polluted. And this reality of interacting models is a big part of why I don't really look beyond 2C in terms of practical planning. I think 2C is close enough. We're going to hit it before the full force of AMOC collapse bends everyone's models completely out of shape. And the question, of course, is what the heck are we going to do then? I think we're probably still talking about continued warming beyond that. I think we're talking about a situation that's going to be pretty weird, and that there could be communities that will prove resilient to the challenges ahead. With AR, I wanted to build a lighthouse, and I think we're doing a good job getting the light out there. A lot more people understand now how their homes will change by 2C than they did. Since I founded AR in August of 2021, we've reached over 250,000 individuals. People who want to look ahead, people who are looking for this information. It's easier to find it now, and that makes me really happy. I'm shining a light on 2C for a reason. I think it's the last place we can clearly see. I want you to know I don't think we have a good map for what lies beyond that. But let's think a little bit more about 2C, what it means for the US and Canada, and how AMOC collapse might change that picture. Let's talk a little bit about the overall picture that I've gained from the NCA5 in my almost a year of deep study of this text and figures. The NCA5 has some real changes from the NCA4. The picture the NCA5 paints for 2C, some of the revisions to our understanding are dark and scary, and they hurt me to take them in. But some of the revisions, they actually do point to increased strength and stability in a couple of our key lifeboat areas. Let me draw you some broad strokes. I'll make more videos with more details on this stuff. I think it's important, but here's the basics. We're starting from the west. The West Coast is looking at a higher level of projected change than before, which sucks really bad. It's really upsetting. The water cycle is going to be messed up in large parts of the West Coast because we're looking at a shift from snow to rain in the winter. The snowpack is likely to be negatively impacted all the way up to Washington and beyond into BC. That's going to cause landscape transformation. Landscape transformation can mean fire. The West Coast should not take in more population. There are a lot of survivable West Coast outlooks. There's tremendous and beautiful resilience potential in the West. Don't think I'm counting you out, West Coast, but if you're not already in the region, if you're a person looking for a destination, I wouldn't recommend going to the West Coast. I wouldn't recommend going to Washington, and that's not because it's bad. Because it's pretty full, I wouldn't recommend going there. We got to be thinking about our sustainability, our potential lifeboat regions in ecological ways, in big picture generational ways, which is very different from the ways of thinking and relating with the land that got us where we are now. It's the same picture with the little patches of stable desert and with the high places. Colorado, you look great. I wouldn't recommend moving to Colorado as a generational thinker unless you have ties there, because Colorado is a pretty big food importer. And I think it's already pretty crowded and expensive in Colorado. If you're looking for a place to go, heading east from the West Coast, the first place I'd consider is Montana, especially towards eastern Montana. That's where you start running into a little capacity, a little water capacity, a little potential for increased population in a sustainable way. You got to think east in Montana, though, because the fires on the Idaho-Montana border, they look likely to be real bad, and they're getting bad already. I would get well east of that border. And folks, no matter where we live, the smoke is going to be bad. An air purifier is a good resilience purchase, particularly important if you're raising children. Air quality is very important in children's long-term health outcomes. We got to protect them if we can. How far north do you need to go if I'm drawing the border at eastern Montana to the west? I want you to go pretty far north if you're moving for climate. If you're thinking about the western part of that edge, get north of the Kansas-Nebraska border would be my recommendation if you're moving for climate. As you keep moving east, after you get towards Indiana, you can drop that line south a bit. Kentucky, West Virginia, and inland Virginia all have areas that look quite nice as we look towards 2C and that have enough water potential to potentially increase the population in a safe, sustainable way. Then you start hitting the East Coast, and then you need to get out the fine-toothed comb because those coastal areas have outlooks that are intensely variable on many factors, and the biggest impacts of AMOC collapse that we're going to feel in North America is going to be high-end sea level rise. Let's go back to the paper for just a minute, because this really surprised me a lot when I took it in. How much of the warming is confined to the Southern Ocean, laser blasting Antarctica, creating worldwide sea level rise? I smelled it's going to be significant. All the sticky outy parts of the East Coast, from Delaware to Massachusetts, are looking real bad, even at 3 feet of sea level rise. In a true higher end sea level rise situation, we're talking about definite retreat being the winning strategy. But all right, I said take out the fine-tooth comb, because the East Coast is good coast. We've got some good fisheries, sustainable fisheries on the East Coast, important marine habitat. Our coasts are worth defending in so many ways, including for the future of life. Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire all stood out to me as places to build resilience if you want to be by the coast in an area with potential well beyond 2C. Don't be dumb. Don't be right on the coast and be like, that's what Emily said. She said this would be fine. Of course not. There's giant storms and stuff. If you want to be near to the coast, those states have coastlines that by and large are more resilient looking. I think it's safer to be closer in those locations. So that's kind of blocked the map, right? That's your general go here if you're looking for somewhere to go zone, and it's looking pretty big. Montana to Maine's a pretty big area. And going up north into Canada, I think that we have a lot of good potential in Toronto, in Montreal. I would say Winnipeg probably falls into that go zone too. I think Winnipeg's got a lot of potential. I'm going to detail what I see as the best lifeboat regions within this big block in another video. There's particularly strong high capacity areas where we could take more people in sustainably within that big decent area. I want to take a nice focused look at it. But I want to say a few words about the Southeast before I kind of close out on telling you this story, this overview story. I'm not counting out the Southeast. You know, when I said don't move to Washington, please hear me. I didn't say Washington is bad. I think Washington has beautiful potential. When I think about the Southeast, we're talking survivable outlooks. We're talking about the potential for rich resilience. In the Southeast, I'm concerned about those emerging inland hurricane tracks. I'm sure we all are. Pain of those that we're feeling now is terrible pain. I'm worried that those inland hurricanes are going to get worse with AMOC collapse. We already expected them to get worse with the warming. With the AMOC collapse, it looks like they could maybe get even further inland. Part of me is scared that that's what pushed Helene to the mountains because we weren't expecting it to get that far inland. I'm a little worried that that's part of what caused this now. And that's just me expressing my read of these trends. This is not like me saying anything with the full force of knower or whatever. It's just doesn't feel good to me. I'm not 100% sure that I'm reading this correctly. Looking back here at this, we can see a couple of different high pressure measures predicted in this paper around winds and velocity potential in the Southeast. This is a part of the figure related to these winds that I would love to have someone with more meteorological expertise help me interpret. I don't have the background. All I know is that when I see a really dark spot and a lot of lines coming out of it, that makes me feel disconcerted. I think if you want to move for climate because of these concerning factors, you shouldn't move to the Southeast, just like how you shouldn't move to Washington. I would say you shouldn't move to the Southwest because parts of that had a drying trend projected with warming also have a drying trend projected with AMOC collapse. So you're going to get a double dose of that drought there. I wouldn't move to the Pacific Northwest because I would move to a higher capacity region where the housing costs are not yet totally bonkers. I would move where the heat outlooks 2, 3C are looking very survivable without air conditioning, which is kind of where I'm laying the pleats as I try to define the lifeboats better. In that general blocked area is where will passive cooling work. It's hard to look at this reality, isn't it? I find it hard to look at even as I celebrate how much promise remains. Because this is a big change. This is a terrible level of change we're talking about here, and I don't see a way out of it. We got to go through this turning. We got to go through this turning in our hearts. I want to take a moment to talk about AR. AR is sticking around. AR is providing climate information. I feel a lot of energy and encouragement from the community to really dig in on practical resilience information as well, both in terms of stuff and in terms of developing our internal resilience capacity to live in these times of change. Regarding what AR is going to do in the future, I had made a lot of plans and a lot of people put time in regarding land purchasing work with AR. But then my husband got so sick and he's going to need to be in treatment for a while. He's not going to be able to work for a while. So I do need to keep working on making money so that I can take care of our family, which is still frustrating to me because if I had been able to continue with our plans, we'd have more land now. We'd have it today. We'd be working on it today. I would like to hear from people who are interested in continuing discussions and action around land purchasing. I would like to share the work we've done so far in the AR community around legal structures for acquiring land. So get me some feedback by email or in the comments if you want to try to keep moving forward on this with me. As things stand, I gotta admit, I have some needs. I could get a different job and provide for my family in an easier and less crazy way, but I want to keep doing this work. I don't see a lot of other work like this out there. If there's a way forward, I want to push forward. Financially, I'm proud to say I'm barely in the black. I am treading water. I'm currently supporting my family of 5 on 3K a month, which is very tight. Carrying my family through this terrible time with my husband's health, it's taken a toll on me and it's not over. I want to thank 3 women, the 3 largest donors to AR this year, whose contributions have brought my family through what I suspect is the tightest part of our struggle and who have shown me great compassion. These women, Carol A., Lori N., and Tammy J., they're the reason I'm not working nights at the gas station to keep feeding my kids through this time. They're the reason I get to sleep, and they're the reason that those days that I was just too sad to go on when we were waiting for more information about if my husband was going to live or not, that I knew I could rest for a few hours during this dark time. I really appreciate what they've done for me. Ladies, thank you so much. My family's struggle isn't over. I've still got a long carry, and there's no certainty in the outcomes with his health. I've been putting in about 60 hours a week. I need to drop that to a hard 40. I need to take more time in my week to rest and take care of myself, or I think I will get sick. I want to stay in the game here with you, and my family needs me to stay in the game. So I'm going to start taking Mondays off and move towards making you all one really good video a week. Regarding video production, I will be maintaining the Thursday drop time as the algorithm does prioritize that regularity. Next week, on November 21st, I'm releasing a video about emerging mosquito species and the diseases they carry. Both the mosquitoes and the diseases will be new to large parts of the US, and they are heading our way. The following week, on American Thanksgiving, I'm working on an update for our friends and supporters in the UK and the EU. On December 5th, that's when I plan to release a video about those biggest lifeboat regions across North America, across the US and Canada. I'm sure the algorithm is going to punish me for not making 2 videos a week, but there's a way you can help with that if you're interested, and that is through contributing to our community shorts. You can join the Discord and you can get into the group that's contributing to that project. If you don't want to join the Discord, email me. I'll get you connected. I think it would be really cool to see more of what other folks are doing as we dig in, as we build resilience. I think it'll help to build a culture of resiliency, a culture that's living in response to reality and in response to change. I want to build a culture that's centered on the earth, that's listening to the pulse of these deep earth systems. I think we should listen to these systems with concern and with love for the earth. Change is coming. These conditions look like they're going to be very weird indeed inside of 10 years. I think we're in a good window to respond to change, that we're entering a time where we will face strong winds. Many structures will collapse, like literally. These coming storms look pretty wild in that AMOC modeling paper. Globally, there is so much horrible stuff in the modeling, and I don't know about you, I can feel the change on the ground here in America. Here where I live in Iowa, and I live in an area that's projected to be relatively low change. When I talk with folks in higher change areas projected to be higher change all around the US and Canada, I hear more evidence every day that the 1.5C models have been pretty accurate. We are feeling what you would expect to feel at 1.5C. If you're looking towards the future with climate in mind, there's places you don't want to be at 2C. And there are places where building resilience is completely possible, even as we enter a world where models are going to collide, where things are going to get completely weird, where all kinds of unexpected stuff is going to happen. Here in our lifetimes, we must come to expect and accept unexpected things. We must have the mental and emotional resilience to really roll with a complicated reality. This Earth system update, the news is not great, but it's a warning we need to hear. It's time to brace up. If that El Nino turns out to come and it turns out to be a big one, I really don't want that to happen, we could hit 2C pretty fast, like a couple of years fast. I don't think that's the most likely thing that's going to happen, but I don't see it as off the table either. It concerns me. Makes me think that this is the window. I think it's time to respond to change now. Let's get ready. Folks, thanks for watching. I want to take a moment to say thank you to the AR community, to the donors, to the volunteers, to everyone spreading the word online, and especially to everyone doing the work in your households and on the ground. It's thanks to all of you that I can keep doing this work, and I'm so grateful for your support. I'm glad to be getting ready with you, and I look forward to talking with you all again soon.